call our meeting to order. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
Miller. Here. English,
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Ettinger.
Here.
If we would rise for the invocation, we have Jeffrey Winkler from the New Life Church with us tonight.
Bow your heads and join with me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for who you are, that you are in everything, you sustain everything, and all wisdom flows from you and the fear of you. We pray that you would bless our leaders and bless our city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Woody, say the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we don't have any amendments to the agenda tonight, so we will move on to the presentation. We have a fire department recognition to Armstrong Park and Fernand Hill area neighbors for earning a national recognition for wildlife preparedness. Bobby.
Mayor and Council, both myself and Katie Kosenki from the Parks Department are here to recognize the first two communities in the city of Coeur d'Alene to reach national status for the Firewise program. We just got a short little presentation. So Firewise is a nationally recognized program that promotes reducing fuels in the WUI area for the homeowners and property owners to make their area much safer. So in order for them to get to this status, there is quite a lot of things that need to be done. First of all, community assessment, which we go out and we evaluate the hazardous assessment and the hazards in the community to see what level they're at as far as low risk, moderate risk, high risk, or severe risk due to just the natural vegetation that's out there. We come up with an action plan. We hold a community event, and then we get a board from those communities, those volunteer members from those communities. Oh, pardon me. So, evaluation of the neighborhood, we take a proven assessment tool and gives it a point value, which gives us our hazard rating. It also comes with how many structures are on in the area and how dense that area is. We take that, combine it, figure out an action plan that is usable, workable for the community to make their areas much safer for themselves. We held 2 community events this year. The first one was May 5th at Venture Centennial Park. The picture on the left is a tree limbing company that voluntarily came out and did a hazard cleanup to show exactly what the Firewise recommendations are. Removing the ladder fuels, taking some dead brush off the ground, not making a clear shot so you can see all the way through it, but getting those fuels manageable. The idea for this program is the closer the vegetation is to the property, the less fuels we want to have. It's just simple. Fires burning, coming towards the structure. You reduce the fuel starting at 100 feet out from the structure, reducing the fuels to 30 feet out. As a fire comes in, it's losing food, the fuels, and it gets to that green space, and it's very manageable. It barely creeps along, or it snuffs itself out. The second event we had was at Armstrong Park, and that was held on May 12th. And these both were first-time events, and we got a pretty good turnout on both of them. So this is a property owner that took the Firewise program, the plan, and 100% built their property per the specs. They used fire-resistive planning material around the structures. They reduced the fuels greatly around the structures up to 30 feet. They even used Firewise approved fire-resistive building materials. And if you can see, the fire burned 360 all the way around up until the grass. Now, this is an extreme example. And obviously, this was down in the Wenatchee area where the brush is not that high. But if we can take some of these recommendations, which the two communities have already started, it's going to make those areas so much safer when a fire comes through. It's not going to matter if, because we know fire is going to happen, but if we can practice fire safe and use safe tactics and these recommendations, then the chances of keeping the structures, and also the most important thing is life, is going to greatly diminish. So I'd like to introduce our community chairpersons for the Firewise community for Victorian Drive area. We have Gene Foster. Thank you, sir. And for the Armstrong Park, we have Chief Miller, retired Chief Miller. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you.
Pardon me?
And I was just thank you.
Yes. These two gentlemen stepped up and were a great help for Katie and I. We started this over a year ago, and we just got nationally recognized roughly a couple months ago. So it's been a long fight with Katie and I working towards this, and without these two gentlemen, we could not have done this in this time frame. So the benefits, nationally recognized. There's only two other programs in North Idaho. One's in Kellogg, and the other one is, pardon me?
Worley.
Yeah, down by Worley area. We're the only community in the North Idaho that has two of them so far. We posted the signs in their communities last week, so anybody driving up to and through can see that this is a Firewise community, that they practice the recommendations, the fire safe. Our volunteers, we're increasing our board. These two gentlemen are the chairs. Katie and I are the vice chairs for those communities. And then we have other volunteers coming in. And then public education. We're going to be holding a community event every year in these two locations. And we're hoping to gather more and more residents, not just from the community, but from outside the community to come up and learn some of these tactics. Coeur d'Alene is pretty much a big wooey area. We have trees everywhere. There's other communities that's already contacted us and are interested, so we're going to start working with them as well. So right now, we would like to present to these two chairpersons their plaque from Firewise that they can proudly display in their community rooms up in their neighborhood. This is for Armstrong Park. Jim, thank you, sir, for all your help.
And then for Jane Foster of the Fernan Hill area and Victoria neighborhood as well.
And that's all I have for right now.
Bobby,
Would
do
it
you
be
wanna get
possible for a picture?
Another picture?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Go in front of the stage there, then we'll get council in the background. You guys want to scooch this away a little bit? There we go. I'll do one more. It's a little slow moving camera. There you go.
Yes, sir.
So we have these two neighborhoods that have this fire distinction. Are there other neighborhoods in Coeur d'Alene that maybe we're going to move forward on as well?
Yes, I have already targeted, I guess that's a poor word about it. I've isolated and picked out areas, and there's about 7 other areas that will fit this model perfectly. Each community has to, in kind, through volunteer, through renting equipment, hiring somebody to come in and do some work, there is a monetary base. It's $24.14 per dwelling unit. So each year, this work has to be done to keep them nationally recognized, to be in good faith. Like I said, there's about 7 or 8 other communities inside the city that I have deemed this program will work very well. And we already had another community just about a month ago contact us, and we're going to be visiting with them very shortly.
I think with the last 3, maybe 4 years, with all of the increased smoke because of all the wildfires, the importance of this education is becoming more and more apparent.
It is.
All the time.
You're exactly right. We can do as much education through Facebook, through mailings, but the best is face-to-face and getting the community together and us hearing their concerns, us giving them recommendations that we know that are proven, and work together as a big partnership.
Yeah. Any questions from council for Bobby? All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to public comment. Now, we do have a budget hearing that's going to be our last item for the day, so anyone that would be on the budget shall have that opportunity, but anyone that wants to come up just for general public comment on city business can do that. And Susie, if you'd like to do it twice, you could do it twice too, if you'd like.
I'm going to.
Well, there you go.
I'm all prepared.
Good.
Or prepared twice. Let me take this off. Susie Snedeker, City. Last night at 10 o'clock, the fireworks went off once again. It's like, must be like living in the Middle East, except I'm in Coeur d'Alene. Graft and corruption, my standard poodle, freaked. He has Addison's. He doesn't have the ability to, he doesn't create a hormone for the fight and flight response. Our dogs, our Addisonian dogs, I have 2 of them. Our Addisonian dogs are at great risk during this time. The fireworks have been a bone of contention. No doubt you've read the letters to the editor in the Coeur d'Alene Press. Anyway, so people with PTSD, small children, 10 o'clock at night, come on, small children, animals, adults, people, your citizens. This affects those of us, my guess is primarily in this quadrant of town, in the lower quadrant of town. So I went to the park. I talked to Kenny. Kenny told me to, and I talked to Chris Filios, and Chris Filios told me to go to the Park and Waterworks Advisory Board meeting, which I did this morning. They only meet 4 times a year, and I was there this morning, to ask them what, if anything, we could do. And the upshot was that I just told Chief White, everybody had a different idea. Nobody was really sure who was responsible, except Bobby knew, of course, but Bobby just showed up here. The recommendation was that I asked the council, you in the council, to consider a recommendation regarding regulation of the fireworks. Perhaps no percussion, let them sign their name in drones, good for us. But not this constant barrage of fireworks. You never know when they're going to go off. You don't know. There's nothing about them. Years ago, I talked to Bill Regan about it, and he was going to advertise, put something in the paper when they were going to set them off, because a friend's dog had fled and had terrible vet bills as a result of the being frightened by fireworks. Not 4th of July fireworks. This is fireworks from the resort. So I'm here to ask you to seriously consider some type of relief and making a decision or a resolution. I don't know what you have to do, but something to relieve us from the onslaught of these fireworks.
So Susie, it's interesting that they tell you to come back to us when we're
I
right now
know, I
we're
know.
not the regulating body.
I know.
So
They knew that too.
us doing a resolution when they're the regulating body is really meaningless.
Well, but it does affect your citizens, perhaps in a negative fashion. And as a citizen who doesn't live right up, oh, here we go again.
No, go ahead.
It doesn't, as a citizen who doesn't live right down at Sanders Beach area, but I live up, and I'm negatively affected, if your citizenry is affected by, in a negative fashion, by something in a county, if you can make a declaration that, gee, you know, maybe we should consider something or talk to somebody, I don't know. But what can we do?
But, you know,
Are we stuck?
you know, I find it
I
interesting.
mean, this is a PR nightmare for somebody, and I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to do that to the citizens for.
And we've talked about the fireworks issue. Council has kind of weighed in on a few different things, but I think the county sometimes forgets that we're also citizens of the county.
Well, Chris Filios was aware of that.
And so I think what I'll have a conversation with Chris, and then I'll bring something back to council
Okay.
to see what direction we'd like to take.
Thank you. I'd just like to see some relief of some, and I'm not alone. I mean, there are a lot of people who feel the same way. I just happen to be the one who's here.
And on the flip side, you know, I've done a little homework on it too, and I live right down in that area, and
Right.
I talked to, you know, 10, 12 of my neighbors, and they're good with it.
That's nice.
They're okay with it, and they're down right in what you would consider to be the battle zone. So I think it's something that I'll have a conversation with Chris, and then I'll bring something back to these folks here. And
Thank you
we'll talk about it some
thank
more.
you for just considering it and just listening to the issue, because as I said, I'm not alone. I mean, I'm not the only one on this thing. There are a number of people who are affected by it in a negative fashion. And poor graft and corruption.
Yeah, well,
Not
Susie,
pleasant.
last night was the latest that.
10 o'clock.
What?
It was 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I know, it was the latest that they've ever shot them off.
Lucky us.
Huh?
Lucky us.
Well,
It's interesting, so, because I know right when they started, because I looked over the clock and it was 9:59, and I told my wife, we're going to hear about this tomorrow. And so it went from 9:59 and it went to 10:06.
And I have to be the one,
So I
right?
can tell you that it did go for 7 minutes, but I appreciate your comments, and we'll have some more conversation.
All
on
right,
it.
fine. Thank you so much, and thank you to the council for considering it as well.
And you'll be back?
Oh, you bet.
Okay,
I can't disappoint Vonnie.
okay.
Mayor Widmeyer, I recently heard from David Callahan, who is the community planning director at the county. The county is working on a draft ordinance for noise control. So we've requested to receive a draft when it gets to that point, but it might be a time to weigh in with county officials for sure, because I'm told, again, that they are working on some type of noise ordinance.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.
Anyone else have public comments tonight? If not, we will move on to the consent calendar. Woody?
Well, Mr. Mayor, what do you think? How about I move to approve the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 18047?
second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Ittinger,
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Kukin,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. Announcements. Any member of the council have announcements tonight? No announcements seen. I have an appointment. I would like to appoint Faye Sweeney to the library board.
So move.
Second?
Motion and a second to appoint Faye Sweeney to the library board. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to a presentation, Memorial Grandstand Final Cost Estimates, and Bill Greenwood.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Steve Roth is here from Architects West. We've been working with him for some time, he and John Mueller, about the remodel of our grandstand. So he's here to give you an update. And when Steve's done, we'll talk about my staff report with some additional funding from Parks Capital. So with that, I'll give it to Steve.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Let me just get my slideshow set up here. Okay, so my name's Steve Roth. I'm with Architects West. I've been the architect for the Memorial Grandstands renovation, along with John Mueller, my colleague and coworker, who is the site designer and also in this case the local history expert. So we've, pooled our strengths and brought together this presentation and design for the grandstands. So what I'm going to do is just run through an update on where we are in the process, go over the design real quickly, and then schedule and budget at the end. So first we'll just start with where we stand in the process. So we've completed design all the way. Right now the project is out to bid, and it's available to general contractors at this point to pick up a set of plans and give us a bid price. It was advertised on Friday, August 31st. It'll be advertised again on September 14th. We do have an on-site walkthrough for general contractors to attend on September 19th at 10 a.m. And then we're intending to receive bids right now on September 28th at 3 p.m. So that's when we'll open the bids and find out how much it's actually going to cost. After that, we'll proceed to award the contract and begin construction as soon as possible. We'll go over a little bit more on the schedule later, but construction, of course, is going to be time sensitive on this one relative to the softball season and winter as well. So I'm going to go through the design real quickly, where it stands right now. Some of you may have seen it already. These are photos, of course, of the existing Memorial Field grandstand. I think everyone's driven by this or attended events at it potentially and is familiar with it. Built in the 40s, I think it was opened in 1947 for its first season. And since then it's gone through various repairs and different renovations, but generally is representative of how it was originally in the 40s. So it is in fairly poor condition right now. We can even see in some of these photos some of the wood rot that's taking place. So structurally there's quite a bit of work here to be done. As well as other refinish work, and I'll go through kind of how we're going to address those items in this presentation. Historically, what we've done with the design is try to bring the existing grandstand building back to kind of its original like-new character, as well as add a little bit of modification and additional function. Some of the design brings back other historical structures in Coeur d'Alene that don't exist anymore. This particular photo was the original baseball grandstand that was built in a different location, but it was the first one that was built back in, I believe the date on the photo is 1906. And it's got some certain style about it that we borrowed from for the new design, and we'll go into that in a little bit. These are a couple of other structures. Of course, the Fort Sherman gate right there. There's a gazebo on the right. There's pieces of detail from various local historic architecture that we've borrowed that are repetitive in buildings that mostly no longer exist. And we've tried to bring some of that local Coeur d'Alene architectural history into this Memorial Grandstands project. So not only is it a restoration of the grandstand itself, but it's kind of a representation of historic local Coeur d'Alene architecture. This is a site plan for the grandstand. I'll use the mouse to point out a couple of things. This is the baseball field right here, carousel right here, parking is over here, and then the city park is here, just to get you oriented. All of this area in here is the current and existing paved plaza that exists between the carousel and the grandstands. There aren't a lot of site improvements that we're doing. We're focused mainly on the building itself. We're leaving the site alone around the building for the most part. We are replacing the small ramp on this end with a much larger ADA accessible ramp system that meets current building code. The existing ramp does not, so it's going to go away. On the other side of the building, similar situation. The existing ramp does not meet current ADA code, so we're taking it away and replacing it with a stair. So one end of the grandstand will have a stair, the other end a ramp. So the floor plan for the grandstands, again, just to keep everyone oriented, the baseball field is out in this direction, the plaza is here. So within the grandstands itself, underneath, there's quite a bit of space. There used to be a concession in one of the corners. It was located over here. That concession is no longer operating. The plan is to essentially gut the structure completely underneath and insert some usable and functional spaces. And what we have, starting kind of from right to left, is beginning with a storage room, then we've got a home locker room for the home team. We've got a concession space here that can be leased by a concessionaire. So there's a sales area, a prep area, and a storage area that are all part of that concessions space. Women's restroom, men's restroom, accessible directly from the outside for use by the public, also for use by teams. And then there's a visitor locker room. Each locker room does have its own dedicated unisex restroom. And then at this end of the building, we've got a ticket booth with a counter shutter and a ticket sales counter. And lastly, the dugout with a piece of dugout space that opens onto the baseball field. I will point out that the home locker room does have access directly into the dugout. Visitors locker room does not. We've got a visitor's dugout that's on the other side of the baseball field already existing that's been built.
Can I ask you, why does the visitors not get access to the field?
They have access to the field by going around the grandstand, but the home locker and home team get to use this dugout. It's the home team dugout, so they're directly connected to each other with access. The visitors' dugout is on the other side of the diamond, so they have direct access to the field from their dugout. But their locker room, from that, they need to walk around the home plate essentially to get to their dugout where they'll access the field from.
So they're not as special?
Correct.
Okay.
They are the visitors, so.
I need to hear it. Okay.
Home team advantage.
Is that normal, Ron? Okay, just checking.
This is the seating plan. The grandstand seats somewhere between 600 and 800 people, depending on how tightly we pack them together. We're not changing the seating capacity other than removing a little bit of seating to add an ADA seating space. So basically a roll-in wheelchair space, one here that will fit 2 wheelchairs and one here that will fit another 2 wheelchairs. And then we've got an optional alternate for a scoring platform right here. You can see the roof below that we're adding, and actually I'm going to back up, I forgot to point that out. This dashed line right here on the floor plan is a roof that we're adding, a shed type roof that covers lineup space for concessions and restrooms and can also cover some outdoor tables and chairs for seating with concessions. So this is what the grandstands may look like. This is a view from the park. You can see some of the photos off to the right that represent some of the historical character we're bringing in, some of the detailing that's being used here in the new design. One thing that we've done to the existing building is to cut out the corners, this corner and the other one over here. The intent of that is to provide lineup space for tickets, access into locker room, and reminiscent of the original baseball grandstand from the early 1900s. So this is a way for us to bring together the existing grandstand restoration and the original grandstand architecture into one item that kind of represents baseball history in Coeur d'Alene, you might say. Another reason for doing this has to do with the existing siding and restoration and replacement of that. It just reduces a little bit the amount of the siding that we have to restore or replace, actually, and gives us an opportunity to use some other more durable and lasting exterior finish materials. I'll describe that a little bit more also. This is what the view of the grandstands looks like from the field. So generally it's still going to be green. Right now the building is 100% green. We've brought in some contrasting, call it beige or tan color, to kind of highlight and accent some of the pieces of the grandstand, make it a little more interesting than just a 100% green structure. Here you can see one of the cutout corners, and this is the new ramp system dugout right here for home team access onto the field. This view also includes the ADA seating and optional scoring platform. So the siding on the grandstands is really one of the things that gives it its historical character. You know, if you walk up to this building, it's essentially a rectangular box with a lot of seats in it. So what is it that's really valuable about it? Well, it's got this very unique Dutch lap siding, or cove lap, it can be called. German lap is another name for it, all the same names for this profile of siding right here. So this is a picture of the existing siding on the building. So the question in our minds was, okay, what do we do with the existing siding? There's a lot of it. It's in poor condition. Do we restore it as is to respect the actual historical building and its original materials, or how do we handle that? Well, after taking a look at this building very closely, the vast majority of the siding is in condition that's just too poor to really bring back to life reasonably. It would cost too much to try and restore the siding, so the decision was made to replace it with new. The siding will still be wood. It'll be in the same profile. It'll have exactly the same look that it does now. Instead of being an applied paint on the siding, we're using a penetrating solid body stain. So it'll still be a green building, but it'll be a stained and better protected siding than it is now. Hopefully will last longer. Being wood siding, it will be a maintenance item that the Parks Department will have to keep up over time. But there are other, I guess, lower maintenance materials available, but none in this style and profile. If we wanted to maintain the style and profile, we'd have to have something custom made. The cost is just too high to do that, so the decision was stick with wood, stain it instead of paint it. The bleacher surface, this is really kind of the wear layer of this whole building. It's where people walk and sit. How are we going to handle that? This right down here where the cursor is, that's the main walkway back and forth across the grandstands. As part of the base bid, that main walkway will get a layer of plywood over it as part of the structural reinforcement that has to be done. And then a poured surfacing material on top of that, a resinous flooring essentially that's weatherproof, durable, and very low maintenance. And also under the base bid, the rest of the seats will be sanded and painted. We do have an alternate bid item to treat the existing seats in the same way as the main walkway, to clad them all with a layer of plywood coated with resinous material that will prevent water from dripping through the building a little bit more and also last a lot longer than what we see there. Some of the exterior finish materials. This is a photo of the existing roof structure. The existing roof planks need to be removed. They're in extremely poor shape. They're going to be removed and replaced with new roof decking. We've decided to take the existing material out of the roof, refinish it, and use it as a finish material for ceilings and some interior wall finishes. So we're reusing and recycling essentially the existing structural material of the building to try and, again, keep as much of it there as we can. So this photo in the lower right is an example of how that may look on a ceiling, for instance. Other materials that we're considering using are fiber cement panels on the cutouts. So here we can see what would be the new siding. This would be fiber cement, and then up on the ceiling surface here would be the wood finish. Fiber cement panels are essentially maintenance free. In this case, they do need to be painted, but they won't ever rot or disintegrate like the wood will, especially down low. You can see here low on the building we've used fiber cement panels for weather and water resistance. So we've got the project divided up right now into a base bid and then a series of alternate bid items. So this is the list of what's included in the base bid. It says all required structural upgrades and repairs. We do have some optional structural upgrades as part of the alternates, but definitely everything that we must do to this building is part of the base bid. There are some more things that the engineer strongly recommends we do, but that aren't absolutely necessary. So we've divided those out into a separate price item that can be accepted or rejected. Replacing all the siding, all the rooms within the existing building are included, the new shed roof, the signage on the building, safety netting. Right now there's chain link fencing protecting the spectators from fly balls, etc. We're going to remove the chain link fencing and replace that with a baseball safety net that you see at modern baseball fields. Rebuild the guardrail that separates people from the baseball field on that walkway. The ramp and stair access, the dugout, the accessible seating, and then repainting of the existing bleacher treads and risers. So this is a list of the alternate bid items. So backing up, all of these together will receive one bid price from the contractor for all of this scope, essentially. And we'll receive individual prices from the contractor for these items right here. The first one is all of the optional structural upgrades. The second one is new bleacher steps. So right now we have, you may recall, there's some small yellow steps that people use to walk up and down the bleachers. The proportion of those steps is incorrect relative to ADA code. The idea with replacing them is to create a regular step up the building rather than right now you have a long tread and a short tread, long tread, short tread, which is not ideal in the ADA world. We'll never be able to achieve the correct code required ADA steps in this building without completely rebuilding the bleachers altogether. So the nearest we can come is to replace the steps to create equal treads all the way up the building for regular stepping. Relocating the field lights from the poles to the roof. Right now there are some field lights that are mounted on poles in front of the bleachers that create a foul ball danger and also block view. This alternate bid item would remove those poles completely and mount the lights on the roof of the building. Gutters, downspouts.
Question. You're going to put the lights on the roof. You know, isn't that more of a hazard with a foul ball going up, coming back? And
Well, not if the lights are on the roof. I'm going to back up actually to the picture that I think shows what I'm talking about the best. Right here, this pole and this pole are the poles in question. And the danger, as I understand it, is now that the field is oriented differently than it was originally, that if a foul ball is hit, it could bounce off of one of these poles and come straight back at the batter or at someone else on the play field. So the lights that are on top of these poles, which are just out of the view, we can't quite see them, would be taken off of those poles and set onto the roof of the building, and the poles would be completely removed. So they're gone altogether, no chance for a ricochet. Does that answer your question?
yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe, Ron, were you talking about foul balls coming back and hitting the lights?
Yeah,
that
well,
are up
no,
on the
no,
roof?
I mean, I've been involved down there for many years, and I've really never seen a foul ball hit those poles, those light poles, and come back and hit the batter or catcher. Now, the lights on the roof, now, a foul ball could go up and hit those lights and come back down on the field.
It potentially could, I suppose. There are lights all the way around the field, other side too, where that potentially could occur. The lights do need to be there and need to exist. Mounting them on the roof gets them as far away as we can get them from the area of play and removes them as much as we can from danger. And I think the reorientation of the field is a factor here. What we're seeing here is the rotation of the field that was done as part of the other project, not as part of this project. The field used to be pointed in a completely different direction, so the foul ball risk was really non-existent. Now that the field's been rotated, that risk is increased. So this is an alternate bid item that can be accepted or rejected. The next one is gutters, downspouts, and a storm drainage system. Right now there are no gutters on the building. Water drips off the edge and damages the siding when it hits the ground. Plywood, subfloor, and surfacing on the bleacher treads and risers. The scoring platform that I pointed out earlier. Stainless steel toilets and lavatories. So in the restroom, in order to decrease the level of abuse and replacement cost for public restroom toilets and sinks, the suggestion is to use stainless, which is definitely a higher cost, higher first cost, but much lower maintenance cost over the life of the building. And then an upgrade to cedar siding. The base bid includes spruce or fir siding. This alternate would be to upgrade to cedar, which is something we would definitely recommend for the greatest lifespan of the siding. So let's talk about the cost. This is the current cost estimate, not the contractor's bid price. We're going to see what that is on September 28th. So I'm going to go through the highlighted numbers here. The first one, $1,025,972, is the estimate for the base bid, including sales tax. So that's the number we expect to see from a general contractor. The other number here is soft costs associated with that. So permitting, design fees, testing, things like that. So if we only built the base bid building, the project cost is roughly $1.2 million. This is the list of alternates and their estimated costs. If all of them were accepted, the bid price on them is estimated to be $207,000. Soft costs associated with those added in, $273,000 is project cost for just the alternates alone. So if you were to accept the base bid and all of the alternates, and add in all of the soft costs and permitting, testing, et cetera, complete project cost is roughly $1.5 million. That's where we stand right now with the estimate. And of course, all these alternates 1 through 8 are optional. None of them need to be accepted. Only the base bid is the only one that'll need to be accepted. Okay, and then the schedule, and we can go back to any of these things if there are any questions. The blue bar is design, we're done. Green is bidding, that's happening right now during the month of September. And the orange bar is construction. We're going to try and complete the building for the start of softball season, which actually is more like March. So the plan is to get the seating done so that spectators can use the seating for softball games or practices. And some of the spaces underneath may follow a little bit behind by another month or so. So by the end of March, or I'm sorry, the end of April, we expect to have the whole project complete. And that's all I have. If there are any questions.
A question, if we could flip back to the cost estimate portion of that. So if on the top, on the base bid, the fees, design, and contingency, that's roughly 16% of the total. And then when you get down to the alternates, that's about 30% of just the alternates. So I guess my question would be is that why would the fees, design, and contingencies in the second part of that be such a higher percentage?
Well, I do have a breakdown of all these numbers that I can provide. So off the top of my head, I won't try to list what's included in each one of them, but for instance, the plan review cost is in the base bid and not in the alternates. There's some costs that are only part of the project, the base bid project, whereas alternates can be added to that without repeating some of those costs, such as plan review or permitting fees. So that's an example of why those two numbers are not the same percentages. And if you're interested, I can provide you with the breakdown of exactly what's included in both of those.
Yeah, I guess, and this would be a question for Bill, is that we're going to get a final go at this again once you get the bid in to approve the final total here. It's because it's tough for us with, I would think, just speaking for myself, not the other council members, but I would think that they would think it's tough without having some more detail on that line item, just because it just seems so much higher to be able to get I know we want to give a general thumbs up to this project, but without the detail on that, it's tough to approve that total
I
dollar amount.
apologize. I believe I may have sent that detail analysis that Steve's talking about in the packet. If I didn't, I can get that to you.
It's here.
But I
Is it?
thought I had provided that in your packet.
I still don't know why it's twice as much for the fees on the add alternates.
What page are you looking at there, Dan? I think
It's 64
Did I
in the
not
packet.
provide it? I apologize.
Okay.
Starts on 63.
Okay. So anyway, that would just be,
The other
Yeah.
thing I would point out, and it's not part of this slideshow, but it is part of what you're looking at, is the soft costs under the base bid do include a construction contingency. That's a budgeting item, not necessarily a cost to you, but a contingency to cover unknowns or surprises or other things you may want to add during the process. That's included in the base bid soft costs, but not in the alternates. That's another example of why they're different.
okay. Ron?
Where's the concession area?
Let me back up to that slide.
First one, and then all the odd alternates are this.
So in the floor plan, this rectangle right here is the concession area. This is the customer service area, this is the kitchen, and this is the storage room. And if we go forward couple slides, this window right here is the concession window.
Other questions, Dan?
Mr. Mayor, so Bill, I'm going to be really specific here. So I'm looking at the cost estimates, And so I have the first one that's 125, or, sorry, $1,025,000. So where do I see the fees above that? Where would I find the fees?
Again, I thought I provided that in the packet.
It's here, but I just don't know which line item says fees.
Without having it in
A lot
front
of
me, so
line items.
I apologize, I can't tell you which one it
There's a
is.
design contingency, but it's blank. So the number's in there somewhere.
Well, Steve will provide that for you if the one that I gave you is inaccurate or not complete.
Yeah, all I'm showing on the screen is just the basic summary of those numbers, but yeah, in
I
the
gave
detail
them
that you have.
I gave them the detail
Yeah.
stuff that you, the backup documentation behind this.
Other questions? Kiki?
Is the ratio of those ADA seating locations standard for the number of seats between 600 and 800 people to have 4 of them, or was that driven by the space available?
That's the correct proportion. We went over that with Ted Lancy at the very beginning of the project and determined that that was the correct number.
And then there's a stone down there at the Memorial Field that has names of Hall of Fame names. Is that part of this design? Where's that going to be in relationship? It's right now by the dugout, I think.
No,
Yeah.
that's been moved already. It
Oh,
used
that's
to
been
be
moved.
on the south side of the grandstand itself, and when we began the project on remodeling the field, we moved that over into a bed between the grandstands and the carousel. So it's been
Okay.
planted into shrub bed there. It looks real nice. We flanked it with a couple of grasses, so it looks like it belongs.
Okay, and then my other question, you had the gutters and the drainage as an add alternate. Is that, why would that be an add alternate and not a standard part of, if it's going to
Wasn't
destroy
required
It wasn't
by
required.
code, and so we thought it was important because it helps the longevity of the building. It's a system of drains with dry wells that helps pull the moisture, all the water away from the building. Even though they put in that fiber board, the concrete board will help, it's better to get it away. So that's why it was an add alternate. These other items are recommended and not required.
Recommended. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I don't think we have any other questions on that. So maybe, Bill, review, we're looking for approval from council to move forward to the bid phase. And again, we're going to have another go at this once the bid comes in to approve that. So maybe at that time, we can get some more details on the questions.
We can get some more detail on the base bid. What I'm here for your approval this evening is about the add alternates. So I think it's important to do these add alternates. And I went to the Ignite board and we showed these items. And at the time, I had a consensus from my park commissioners that they were interested in partnering with Ignite to share the cost of these add alternates. And so Ignite agreed to that, and my commissioners at their last meeting agreed to that partnership as well. And so what I'm asking this evening is about $136,000 out of Parks Capital to contribute towards these add alternates.
Woody?
So, NIC's got a foot in the door here. For
Yes, they've
150?
contributed some money towards this project as well.
Right, and what do they get for that?
Pardon me?
What do they get for their money?
Well, they've been using that field for years, and they're going to continue to use the field. But they anteed up and participated by adding $150,000 to the project. And Ignite is funding most of this, but they contributed that 150,000. And they will continue to use the field as they've done in all the past years.
Gotcha. So I guess my question is, for the original bid, their 150 is about 13%. Are they in for this additional stuff at all?
No,
Have you approached
we
them?
asked them about helping out with the base bid. These shook out, these add alternates shook out as we moved forward. So we didn't go back to them. I went to the Ignite board, and again, as I said moments ago, they are agreeable. And my commission is agreeable to going into the Parks Capital to help as well.
But they're not agreeable to ask for NIC for a little bit more? Just to
No, it
keep their
never occurred to
percentage
me,
the same?
sir. I never thought about it. They anteed up to 150, and now we're anteing up 136. And Ignite is willing to pick up the rest of it. And again, the lion's share of this project is being funded by Ignite.
And us?
Well, and us, certainly.
Okay.
So I'm wondering whether, we don't have that final number, I'm, just to throw out an idea here, is if council would consider approving 50%, which is basically the agreement that you have with Ignite. So whatever that add alternate project total would be, is that the city would agree to pay 50% out of the capital
Correct.
improvement. We don't necessarily have to approve a exact dollar amount if we say 50%.
That's very wise, yes.
50%.
Yep.
Total, so that's just an idea if council would like to move in that direction.
That's not what the motion says.
Well, basically, it's just to.
Just to approve of assisting.
I did affix a number to it, but I think your suggestion, sir, is more prudent than mine.
Yeah, so anyway, I was just making a,
Yeah, we can do that.
yeah.
I so move.
Second.
So move in a second to,
Yeah, what?
Ron, the motion would be to say that of the ad alternates, that we would allocate 50% out of that from Parks Capital Improvement Funds?
Yep.
Is that, okay? And Woody seconded that. Okay. Renata, did you catch all of that?
Sure did, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? No, just roll call, please.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Aye.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Motion carried. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So we have some other business of some action that we took on August 21st of 2018 on some annexation. Someone would like to?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 18049, which is approving an annexation agreement with Aspen Homes and Development LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 18-1021 by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 18-1021, an ordinance annexing to and declaring to be a part of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, specifically described portions of Section 7, Township 50 North, Range 3 West, Boise Meridian. Zoning such specifically described property hereby annexed, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing for publication of a summary of this ordinance and an effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Mr. Mayor, I move for adoption of Resolution 18-050, approval of labor agreement with firefighter union, Local 710.
Oh,
We're jumping ahead.
So Ron, well, let's just back up here. We got one more, we have the motion to adopt the council bill. So we're one line up above that.
I'll move to adopt Council Bill 18-1021.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Your time will come, Ron.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Aye.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried. I thought, Ron, that you didn't want to hear Troy talk about this, but maybe we'll give him a shot. So Troy, if you could come up and talk about resolution number 18-050, approval of a labor agreement with the firefighter union local 710.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, it's my honor to come forward after about 7 meetings with local number 710, your fire department, on a labor agreement. We are proposing to you a 4-year contract with this group. This group spent a good amount of time discussing medical and a option that exists for firefighters moving to a trust. The timing was not quite right, and so they have agreed to continue to look at that over the next 4 years, and so they have agreed to accept the medical that we have approved by your police association as well. In that, there was a change of 5% increase to the amount that is paid in on the medical premium for employees with dependent coverage. So that was a big part of our negotiation. We included in this contract the military leave benefit, which was also in the police association. So again, a 4-year contract. It has a 2.5% fixed cost of living adjustment over each of the 4 years. It is a contract that recognizes the number of years that folks have been with the city, and once they reach the maximum, there will be a 1% increase per year for the 4 years to the maximum going to our firefighters. And we have taken their pay structure, which currently goes from minimum to maximum in 9.5 years, presuming that the firefighter has satisfactory reviews. This contract moves that maximum to 5 years, min to max in 5 years, which equals what the police association have as well. So again, the mayor was a party to this, and it was a straightforward negotiation. Spent a lot of time on medical, which is a major expense to the city. The firefighters have an opportunity to look at something called the Northwest Firefighters Trust, and let me tell you, we looked at it for many, many hours and did a lot of homework, but it wasn't the right time for that transition to occur. It was too costly for the city side of that equation. So I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Troy? Okay. I just wanted to thank the union president, Eric Paul, and all of his executive board. We had a good round of negotiations, and Eric and his executive board do a great job of representing their members, but they also do a great job of representing the city of Coeur d'Alene and coming to an agreement that is in the best interest of his members, but also in the best interest of the city. So I want to thank Eric for that. And then we would be looking for, Ron, if you wanted to make some movement.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we pass resolution 18-050, approval of labor agreement with firefighter union local 710.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Buchan,
Oh, yeah.
English,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Troy. We'll move on now to Resolution 18-051. It's an improvement of an agreement with H2A Architects for design and construction consultant services for the Water Administration and Maintenance Facility. Terry Pickle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to come before you tonight to bring to you a consultant agreement with H2A Architects. Over the past several years, we've been talking about the difficulty with the expansions of the Ramsey complex and overcrowding there with the different divisions of the city that are occupy that source. With the expansion of the fire and police storage buildings and administration there, we've lost storage space on the site. Traffic on Ramsey is becoming almost intolerable at different times of the day, trying to get equipment and vehicles in and out of there. So we are proposing to relocate the water department from our current building to a new complex up on Howard, adjacent to the compost facility. We've been talking the last couple of years and constructing a new building up there. So this is an example of our proposed site plan. We'd be looking at a large structure that would house our administration offices, our heated storage with vehicle storage in there, as well as a cold storage to handle pipes and materials and fittings. We'd also have some storage bunkers for sand, gravel, cold mix, and some miscellaneous storage on the site. We'd have improved customer access to the front of the building for our water customers. We don't get a lot of traffic in, but we get them in, and it's difficult for them to find us where we're at now. We'd also have deliveries on a routine basis that will be able to come in there. On this is an older version. We also have a gated access to the compost facility so that they decided to change their entry site. Instead of coming in from Julia, they could come in from our site. Also, they can take the larger deliveries there without having to impact the residential neighborhoods. So that's one of the options we've put together there. We are looking at a very simple Spartan building. There had been comments about being careful with what we built. We do need a good-sized building to house everything that we put together. We had Architects West do the original site plan and give us a general size of the building we needed to accommodate space for the offices, the storage, and the shop structure. So we're looking at about 100 by 250 or so building. We're looking at 18 feet tall at the eave line to accommodate our tall vehicles. This is kind of one of the rough floor plans that we had laid out. We've circulated this among the departments of the city to get some comments back. We took it to the project review committee to see what we needed to do there. We got one surprise on there. We hadn't figured on a fire service for the building. We were trying to get away with fire separation because of the vehicle storage. That was not possible. That added another $95,000 cost estimate to the building to put in the fire sprinklers, but it gives us a lot of leeway with what we can do with the building. We're looking at a clear span steel structure, so it's very, very simple. It's kind of an erector set, basically, the way it's set up, so it can be put together relatively quickly. It's a pre-engineered structure. We still have to have an architect stamp for the state of Idaho, as well as the foundation design for it and the utilities. This is kind of an example of what a steel clear span structure looks like in construction mode. It's kind of a big erector set. This is just kind of an example of what the building would roughly look like. This is a FedEx facility, basically about the same size, a little different layout, but kind of what we're looking at. We're hoping to be able to add a little bit of curb appeal on the customer service side of it, as well as we're looking at street trees and xeriscaping, kind of a demonstration area for low water use plantings on the street side to kind of help mask a portion of it and give it a little more curb appeal, but yet still keep that simple feel to it and allow us ease of expansion in the future if so we ever need to. So with that, I'm bringing together a consultant services agreement with H2A Architects. We had 4 firms that submitted proposals for it. We went through a scoring analysis of it. They scored the highest. They had the best presentation. We entered into negotiations with them for the contract. We ended up at $157,212, which is approximately about 7% of what they estimated to be a $2.2 million cost for this building. We had originally budgeted that in this fiscal year at $1.5 million, excuse me, and that was an estimate from about 2.5 years ago. Steel structures have risen sharply in cost. We lack the contractors in this area to really do a building of this size, so there's only a few that can do it. Labor prices have risen, are not likely to go down in the near future, and so that's what we're looking at. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Terry? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your staff report, Terry, it says that you can move the majority of our operations. So what is in the minority?
We will have to wait for a couple of bunkers. We have a storage bunker for material at the Ramsey complex. We'll have to reconstruct that there. We did not include that in this budget at this time, so that'll be something we'll have to move at a later date. Police department is looking for some additional parking, so we may be able to work something back and forth, a little shared use. We have a couple storage buildings on other sites that are there for the wells and chemical storage that we'll maintain there. Most everything else will move to this site, including our meter shop. We're looking at getting a test bench in so we can test our meters rather than just buying replacement meters. We can rebuild what we have and save a portion of the cost there. That'll be incorporated into this structure. That we'll be giving some of the cold storage space that originally belonged to the water department back to the street department that they badly need for storage of their materials.
And you say that you're going to need to, funding will be primarily from rates with a potential for some debt service obligation. Explain that to me, please.
Troy and I have been in kind of discussions on how we would do that. At this point, we do have cash on hand, but not enough. In order, I'd like to keep 3 months operating reserves in cash, and that's roughly about $300,000 a month is what I figure on average. So what we have now currently would not fund all of the building and keep that balance in hand. So we have a potential for either low-interest lease or loan or something of that nature. We haven't really discussed the final terms of it. We're waiting to get the cost nailed down with our consultant to get a final answer on that.
How does this structure fit into the city's facilities master plan?
Really, we haven't done a master plan of the Ramsey complex. We've been talking about that for several years. We had planned in our long-term comp plan to do something either with the Ramsey complex or an alternate site to build sufficient space for the water department. So it is in our comp plan, but as far as the city's plan, it never got included in the Ramsey complex.
Okay, thank you.
Woody?
So are we going to have to raise rates at some point to cover this? Or are you working backwards on that low interest rate?
That is figured into the rate study that we are doing now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we're about 2 months behind on that rate study from where I hope to be here tonight. So we haven't got the particulars on that yet, but it is being worked into that. That's one of the cost options we would looked at.
And then to the west there, or the left side of that drawing, we just gave up some right-of-way through there. Is that going to affect you guys at all?
No, not at all.
You still have clear access, so you have 2 accesses into that complex?
We have 2 accesses, the possibility of a third.
Okay, and you're at 2.2 right now?
That's what the cost estimate was from this consultant.
And that's the landscaping and the asphalt and everything?
That'll be a portion of it, yes.
Okay.
We're hoping to get some of that done actually out of this budget. The street frontage improvements we're working on right now. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Kiki?
Terry, did you mentioned that this site had potential for future expansion if it would need to?
The building.
The building?
The building, yeah.
Is there enough room in this area? Has that been part of the discussion
Yes.
when this was put together? So what's the life expectancy of the current
Of the proposed building? We expect to see 50 years out of it at least.
And then this is $1 million estimated higher than what it was.
Correct.
So were there any conversations regarding alternative materials or holding off until perhaps some steel stabilization in pricing might come through? And what's that conversation?
We talked to several of the contractors in the area, kind of, getting an idea whether it would be prudent to hold off for the future. They're saying that costs are going to continue to rise for the next 2 to 3, even possibly 4 years before they even think they'll stabilize. It'd be about 6 years before the economy will start to turn a little bit, but they say that the building costs will stay at that. They will not go back down. That's what they're telling us.
And there weren't any options for alternative materials for
This is about the lowest cost material that I could come up with.
Any other questions for Terry? If there are no other questions, we'd be looking for...
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of Resolution 18051, approval of agreement with H2A Architects PA for design and construction consultant services for the water administration and maintenance facility.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to oppose this because there's several reasons. Number one is I think the city needs a facilities master plan. We don't have one.
Right.
And so it's probably going to pass. So we're going to be giving you a new facility, but yet we need to get fire and police and streets together to discuss what's going to happen at Ramsey Road, and that's not happening. So I think that it would be beneficial to the city to have a facilities master plan for that area, for that campus, as well as this campus and everywhere else, so that we have a good idea looking into the future, what's coming up, and what we can do. There's also a question of need. I know it would be better for you to have this, but at this point, I'm looking at how cramped you are. And today, Mr. Mayor, I went and visited Under Sheriff Matos at the Sheriff Department, and they're really crowded there. I mean, they have 7 people in an office where you have 3. So I know you still have a lot of people in an office, but it's still not to the point where I would say, yeah, we really need to look at getting a new place. I also think it would be cheaper in the future. I know this is, we're at the height of the building thing. Everything is expensive. We've had our bids rejected because they come in higher than engineering estimates, you know that. Projects have been postponed. I actually think that in the future, it might actually be cheaper, or we might get more for our money when these guys are a little hungrier to look for projects like this. So it did go up $1 million. There's nothing to say that it wouldn't go up higher, that the bids will all come in high. I mean, you know that. I'm sure you've had that discussion.
Yep.
So at this point, I don't think the timing is good, so I will be opposing this, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Here's a couple thoughts on that interesting approach to it. We're just about built out here. I don't think a master planning is where we just redid City Hall. This is relatively new. I don't see a whole lot coming down the line, and I don't think comparing sheriffs and water department are exactly dollar to dollar. You follow?
Well, the sheriff's wants a new facility too, which is why I went out there, because I'm like, well, they've been asking for better facilities for a long time. Terry's asking for one, and I wanted to compare the two just to say, okay, so at what point does it become painful enough that you really, really need one? I also think that the master planning the facilities, I mean, we have a limited amount of space. I know the police department has mentioned expanding their building, which is built for it. We just added the storage for the fire out there. You know, if this happens and water moves out of that campus, then what happens to their facilities? Well, someone's going to take it over. But I just think for the future's sake, always having just something that would say, here's where we want to put our stuff. We have this campus here. We're growing. We're going to be built out soon enough. But where are we going to put it when we have more needs? When all of a sudden we need another 10 cops because the city's been built out, or we need more water guys, more street guys, more fire guys. Let's do a little forward thinking and think about where we put all these things.
And along those same lines is the water department pays its own way. They don't have to come, they don't come to the taxpayers. Their ratepayers cover their costs, whereas police and fire has to come in to the our internal dollars, so.
Well, they're still going to have to finance this somehow,
right,
which is going to be interesting. They are sitting on some cash right now, and I know they want to have reserves. So they're going to be coming back to ask for what it says in the staff report, debt service obligation, which is, borrowing money.
Well, and we've borrowed money from the water department many times for buying parks, and anytime we need big cash between them and the wastewater treatment plant, we borrow money from you guys, pay you back at a decent rate. So I think it's kind of their turn. How about that? It's their turn.
Dan?
Well, I would just say that, it's not likely to get cheaper, and especially with steel and tariffs and all of that. So I think it makes sense economically. Also, I mean, something that appeals to me as somebody who drives that road pretty much every day, a couple times a day, if there's a way to move some of the rig traffic off of there, that's going to be an asset, a benefit to everybody that has to travel, let alone your poor folks that try to get in and out of Ramsey. So anyway, I'm supportive of it.
Any other discussion? I guess just a couple of comments. I would like to see, if you can, in your discussions with your designer, what the cost would be to totally move you out of where you're at now to that. So if they, and I don't want to raise their bill anymore, but but you talk about that bunker and you talk about some other storage. If we could just get as an alternate, maybe what it would cost to totally have you in one site. I just think it'd be much more efficient if we're going to invest this amount of money into a water admin building, that this is where the water department is, instead of having it in two sites. So that would be one suggestion. Dan, I agree with you on your master plan of that area. There's been some preliminary talk of that. Obviously, within the next 10 years, the PD is going to have to expand their building. We need to look at the future of what streets needs are, as well as maybe a different ingress, egress for fire. Yeah. We may want to do something different that goes out onto Kathleen, just to make it easier for those guys to get out. And so there has been some preliminary discussion. I know Troy is going to lead that over the next few months and get it, and bring something back to us. So there is some very initial planning, but I support your idea of that master plan, so. All right, any other comments, questions from council? So, Renata, roll call, please.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
No.
Motion carried. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. Now we're on to our public hearing tonight. This is a legislative hearing. There is a sign-up sheet on the back table. It is interesting that we're talking about this budget. Many people are concerned with the budget, but we only have our faithfuls here to talk about the budget. We wish we had more, but we'll do as good a job as we can. So
The
Vonnie,
others
if
will
you would,
grouse about it later.
so Vonnie, if you would give us a presentation, please.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members and honored guests and staff. Tonight I am asking for approval of Ordinance 3618, the annual appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2018-19. I have a few highlights of the budget proposal, most of which you have already seen, so I'm going to run through them fairly quickly. If you have any questions, please stop me. At the end, I'll go over the changes from the preliminary budget to the ordinance. The first slide shows the significant changes to the general fund revenue from 2018 to 2019. We show that this budget is taking all of the new growth of $493,000. The increase to the tax budget on here is $480,000. Highway users of almost $400,000, transfers in of $353,000, and using fund balance of almost $608,000 to balance this budget. There's a slide of the new construction for the last few years. Just shows how that jumps around from year to year. Here is the tax levy, how the breakdown is for what is included in this budget proposal. So last year's non-exempt tax budget, so that would be the tax budget that does not include the debt service, was $21,352. We're proposing a 2.25% increase to that, which is $480,000. The new construction roll of $493-ish, and then add in the GEO bond levy of $877,000. So the total amount of the levy in this proposal is $23,202,716. This next slide just breaks down if you were to take 3%, 2.5%, to what that generates to the city. There's a 9-year history average of the amount that has been taken of the 3% allowed. So this proposed budget has 2.25% in that. If you average out these 9 years, it comes out to an increase of 92%, or 0.92%. So under 1% a year for the last 9 years.
Frank almost fell out of his chair when you said 92%.
I think Tim
Vonnie,
did
I have a
also.
question in that. On those 0 days, are those election years?
2018 would have been, 2016 would have been, 2014, 2012.
Thank you.
They're not city election years.
Right.
City election are off years.
Actually, they are because they take your office in the off years. Yeah. Or is it the other way around? It's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
This is
So
not
you-
a budget year.
You have partisan elections on the even years, like this year, we'll have an election in November, and then next year in 2019, there'll be a nonpartisan city council election.
So we'll take 0 then.
Right.
Okay.
There you go.
You see the pattern now? Are you
I see
getting
where you're
that?
going. Yeah.
We're not running, so we don't care. Is that what you're getting at, Dan?
No.
Oh, okay.
The next slide shows the statewide foregone for cities close to our size. It's just a nice comparison of what the Coeur d'Alene has done compared to other cities in the state. The September 30, 2017 unassigned fund balance was $8 million. Of that, so 20% would be the expenses in this budget of that unassigned fund balance. We usually like to keep it between 10 and 15, so it is higher than it has been in the past. The next slide shows the history of what that percentage is from year to year. So it has been going up. Here's a list of the capital that's included in this fund balance, or in this budget, sorry. We have an increase in automation, software licensing, a scissor lift and trailer, police department radios, asphalt roller scanner, hot asphalt and patching machine, shop remodel, a chipper and bucket truck, and some pickup trucks. Next slide shows the citywide personnel changes. We've moved a city administrator position to a project coordinator, a finance director position to an accountant. We've added a full-time HR person and eliminated their part-time. Added a partially grant-funded police officer, partially grant-funded victims advocate. We've increased the police ambassador program and moved a part-time administrative support person to a full-time administrative in the fire department. We have changed a mechanic in the street department to a streets maintenance worker. We've added 2 street maintenance workers and deleted some part-time in the street department. Added a parks maintenance worker, a building permit coordinator in the building department, moved a library part-time hours to a full-time reference clerk, and decreased some part-time in recreation. The total increase of that is $242,000. So the current plan is 91 million. Last year was 89. That's an increase of about 1.7 million. Of that, in the general fund, the cost of living increases are 658,000, merit increases of almost 500,000, and increase in capital outlay of 709, which that equates to about 1.8, and then there's decrease in some of the other departments. This is a list of the capital outlay. I think we have 2 in there, because that's pretty much the same things from the last slide. And more of that. So here is the taxable city valuation for 2016-17 and the estimated for 2018. And the city levy rate for 2016 and 17. So from 2016 to 2017, it dropped from 5.9 to 5.51. This next slide just shows the change from last year to the next year of if you owned a house of an assessed value of $255,000, the homeowner's exemption of $100,000 with a net taxable value of $155. In 2017, you would have paid $854. If your assessed value stays the same in 2018, that would drop to about $801. So about $4.39 a month decrease if your valuation stays the same as it was last year. Now, if we look at this with if your assessed valuation goes up 3.7% from last year to the next year, your tax bill would basically remain the same. There would be no change. Since assessed valuations are going up, we also put one in here at 13%. If your assessed valuation were to go up 13% in this budget plan, your tax bill would go up about $112 a year. It's about $9.38 a month. This next slide shows the changes from the preliminary budget to this ordinance that we are asking for approval for. So the changes, actually, this should say budget to resolution. So we published the entire budget, preliminary budget, then we also did a resolution. So these are the changes from that preliminary budget to the resolution. So we added some copier supplies, $9,000, communications equipment in the police department for $33,950. Water department had a few things that need to be added in there, and the wastewater department loader leases. So that was a total increase from the preliminary budget to the resolution of $163,000. So the resolution would have been the high water mark, and so that increased from the full preliminary budget. So from that, here are the changes from the preliminary financial plan to the ordinance that's before you tonight. In the revenues, we have an increase in the beginning balance of $48,000, interest for the water department of $18,000, and we've reduced that property tax number from 3% to 2.25, which saves or reduces the revenues $160,000. So in the ordinance, the revenues are $106 million. Expenses, preliminary plan started out at $91 million. We added in the copier supplies, communication equipment, some things for water, the wastewater leases. We decreased some personnel in the fire department, and we increased the VEBA contributions, and we also decreased the increase. So the health insurance, we had an increase in the preliminary budget of 5.17%, and we've reduced that to 3.17, which saved us $94,000. So the ordinance total for next year's budget is $91 million. And I am open for any questions.
Bonnie, just real quick, on that very last slide that you have revenues and expenditures, the revenues, do those include all of the enterprise funds as well?
Yeah, that's total budget.
Okay, all right. Questions for Bonnie? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in these final numbers, does these include all the latest numbers from the state and other agencies and all the other income that we got?
Yes.
So everything is up to where it should be. When we did the original proposed budget, we were anticipating certain contingencies with the negotiations for the contracts. And now that we know what the numbers are they reflected in here as well?
Yes. We haven't yet finished with LCEA, so we're not really sure. But where they're at right now, we have increased the VEBA amount in here.
Okay.
But we don't know where that will end up, but
thank you.
I think we're close.
Other questions for Bonnie at this time? There may be some more questions as we go along, but thank you very much. Now is the time to open public testimony and ask for public comment. So if there's any member of our audience that would like to come up and speak to us, they're welcome to do this. Oh, it's sign-up sheet. Bonnie is getting the sign-up sheet. But Susie, you signed up, right?
Of course.
Okay. All right, come on up. We've been waiting all night.
I'm going to disappoint Bonnie. You ready?
We're ready.
I know you could hardly wait. Susan Snedeker, do you want me to do anything other than tell you who I am? Susan Snedeker, City Coeur d'Alene. Well, Mayor and Council, this is the 18th year. I know, I swore I wasn't going to do it again. I hate to tell you, but it looks like I picked up the wrong. Oh my God, I picked up the wrong, I picked up last year's notes instead of this year's. Each year I review every item, make notes, as you know, ask questions, and prepare my comments. My comments and questions for 2018 and 2019, I'll start with planning. Professional services this year are $66,000. This is to be used for writing the state mandated comprehensive plan, among other things, I would think, and for Woody and for Amy. I would note that prior planning commissions wrote plans with one city planner. The commissioners participated as volunteers, usually as lunch or after work. Don't think it cost us $60,000. Then we have professional services for 2030 in the amount of $35,000.
45.
For some reason, I thought, that 2030 was an adjunct committee. I now realize that it's a nonprofit with a strong budget and a couple of employees. It appears to me that 2030 seems to be, seems to be directing the planning actions of the city. I question paying this amount to a nonprofit who was not elected, shadow government in my mind, and I object to paying them $35,000 for planning efforts. I realize that you adopted a budget, but you didn't adopt a nonprofit. So, I believe that citizens in each quadrant of the city should be able to participate in the creation of the new comprehensive plan through meetings in each quadrant. The comment of each individual citizen has value in the creation of this document, and I'm a little concerned that the opinion of people formulated at parties and meetings with stakeholders, not my favorite term, are taking precedent over meetings with the general public in those quadrants. So, I go on. In parks, we have a downtown BID. Last year, excuse me, let me breathe for a second. In 2018, the budget was $3,000. Suddenly, it's $10,200. I'm sure Mr. Greenwood will have an answer at some point. With parks capital improvement, need I point out, year after year after year, another year and a zero for Person Park. Absolutely nothing since 2015 for a park whose master plan was approved by the council. What will it take for the city to follow through and budget for those improvements? It seems to me the money is there, if you follow my next comment. Last year's allocation for a dog park relocation was $100,000. Please note that this is for dogs. I like dogs. Person Park is utilized by citizens of all ages, and it's constantly utilized. $100,000 for a dog park, and it was not used. Couldn't we spend that fixing up or using the master plan, applying it to some of the elements of the master plan that need to be taken care of? Then we have, this is one that's a real doozy, also proposes $25,000 for a dock at Harbor Center now. The council, some of you may remember that prior docks were removed to move elsewhere. One might wonder why you're putting in docks at Harbor Center. Doesn't make much sense to me. And $25,000 is a lot for a dock, and who's going to use it? Now, then we get to the Parks Foundation. Remember last year? I asked you about the Parks Foundation. Every year you give them $7,500. My question of the last year remains, why are we financing this group, another nonprofit? Don't ask. What do? They are or were collecting, thank you, Renata, we're collecting donations, contributions for the city. Last year I asked you if you're receiving quarterly reports from them, and you said, no. And again, I'm asking you, are you receiving quarterly reports from them? You're on the, I don't know if you're still on the Parks Foundation. Anyway. Okay, so now close to the end. The Downtown Association, you give them annually $52,000. I would cite Resolution 11039 you adopted, and it's the maintenance agreement between the city and the Downtown Association. The deteriorating condition of the fixed assets, light standards, signals, bricks, etc. continues, as does the annual $52,000. Enforcement by the city seems to be non-existent. It looks a little tacky down there, and I think it's time for the council to demand that the association comply with the agreement made between the two entities. In closing, almost, wait, I have to find something else I wrote. Never mind. In closing, I urge you not to adopt the 3% increase. The increase in property values should make up for that 3% you think you absolutely deserve in order to make this city run smoothly. Thank you.
Susie, I may have a couple of answers to your
Really?
questions.
Good.
Yeah. On that $100,000 for the dog park, it was,
Yes.
we knew that there was going to be a movement on the dog park off of Atlas Road. That
Correct.
was put in there for us to, if that went away, that we would have money to expand over, I think there's a preliminary plan that's going to come forward to the Parks Commission to use that money to basically replace that and expand over into where the park is there off of Atlas. And Bill can explain a little bit more. That was last
to
year.
stay there.
That's been moved forward this year because that's the kind of the plan now. So Bill can address.
No, you have to go sit down.
Yes, ma'am.
This is my time.
So anyway,
Thank
but hang on there, Bill, because we'll bring you back up there. I think you were just shooed.
Just don't come behind
Yeah.
me. That gives me
So-
the creeps.
So anyway, so Bill will explain that on that $100,000 for the relocation, because we are losing that land that the church has allowed us to use.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That was always part of the deal. We always knew that North Shire was going to disappear. But you still budgeted, the fact remains that you budgeted $100,000 for a dog park.
And that was,
Not $100,000 for improvements at Person Field, according to the master plan. That's my argument.
right.
And I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
So
Thank you.
that's where the $100,000 comes from. It wasn't spent last year because at that time the church hadn't made a move to officially say, okay, we don't want you in that dog park anymore. Now it's going forward for sure, so that's why that's in the
So we're
budget.
spending $100,000 on a dog park?
To relocate the existing dog park that's
We're
there
buying
now-
property.
there now.
It's a lot less.
Yeah, Bill will,
I would hope so. Look, I belong to a dog training club, so it isn't $100,000 for a property, so.
no,
We
and
don't
Bill-
have a dog park there, it's just a little bitty, I mean, we have exercise yards, but not.
So Bill will explain that. Panhandle Parks, they helped tremendously, with their executive director and Tinka Schaefer and their board, they did help tremendously with the K-27. They put on events, they did a lot of work there. So in the past year, they have done a tremendous amount of work for our parks. They're gearing up to do more. And but your point on getting financial reporting for that organization is well taken.
Thank you.
And then Bill can probably address that BID. So as soon as we allow him to come up, we can address those.
What about the Downtown Association and the maintenance agreement between the city and the Downtown Association, 11-039? It doesn't seem to be enforced.
Oh, they do a lot of the maintenance downtown. I think Troy can speak to that
Oh,
contract.
you better
and
take a
what
look
the-
at the steel, at the.
Well, we're not going to be able to cover that in that contract that goes to the Downtown Association. That's just for ongoing maintenance.
Ongoing, but there has to be maintenance in the first place to make it ongoing.
Those would be capital items, those items that you spoke on. But, so Troy, maybe if you could just speak a little bit on the Downtown Association maintenance contract.
Yeah, it's one that has been in place for a number of years.
Yes.
You get to see they handle the garbage, they handle the sidewalk issues that come up. So you're speaking about traffic signals and things that need
I'm talking
paint?
about traffic signals, the steel, the light posts that are rusted out, the signals that have no more, have paint, have let go. And as I pointed out last year, they paint to 6 feet high. Now, who paints a pole to 6 feet high, for heaven's sakes? And they paint over rust.
So yes, that's one that we've been working on, and obviously the city has more equipment than the Downtown Association to go up in the air any higher.
But there are contractors that they could hire. And if it's always an excuse, some of these things you're not going to be able to replace because they're so badly rusted out. Anyway, enough of my soapbox.
Points well taken, though, Susie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Bill, if you could come up and address the dog park issue and then the BID movement from 3 to 10.
So the dog park, 100,000, was set aside a few years ago because I had made an offer to the church to actually buy the parcel that the dog park was on. And they were interested in that idea. As it moved forward, they declined the offer. And so what we set aside this year was only $10,000 to relocate the existing park, which was on your consent calendar this evening to around where the tennis courts are on the easterly side. So we were going to need to do some contractual work with a fencing contractor and pay for some asphalt that would have a path that would go down to the east end of that park, and we would move the items that are in the existing dog park to the new location. So that's what it wasn't $100,000 to spend on a dog park. It was $100,000 to purchase the property to build a dog park. That's not what it was for. It was to buy that property.
And it's $10,000 in the budget this year for
There's
relocation.
$10,000 in the budget, and we put that 100 back in to the budget for this year, and we just are extracting 10 to relocate those items to create a dog park within that same vicinity.
Okay, all right. And then the BID.
The BID was an interesting one in that we've always allocated some funds to that. So we do some maintenance down there on irrigation and that sort of stuff, and we have real problems in there with lines breaking under sidewalks and stuff. So Tim's guys will cut it out for us. We'll go in and make the repairs, and then they patch all that stuff. The extra that went into it this year was we found some funding that was in the building maintenance budget, which we couldn't figure out why the solid waste was so high for the waste that we had generated at City Hall. And if we looked at it, in that budget, they were paying for the downtown BID stuff that normally would have been ours in our agreement that Troy referenced from years ago. And so it made better sense to have that money in that BID that I actually put my hands on the ground down there to, so it just made better sense to take it out of the building maintenance budget and put it into the parks BID.
So as far as the general fund goes, it's just a transfer from one department to the other?
It's a wash, correct.
Okay, all right.
The other item was a dock at Harbor Center. That was a deal I was trying to negotiate with a company that was willing to build a dock, and docks aren't $25,000. Docks are considerably more than that. And so this company was interested in working with us to put some docks on our riparian rights at Harbor Center, and they asked us to participate in some of the infrastructure, pilings and a gangway that would go off the Harbor Center seawall into this area. Well, we've chosen to go an entirely different direction, and we're not going to do that with that company this year. We're looking at trying to do something where we might bid that out to a whole bunch of different companies to build us a rental dock system that those companies may use, using our riparian rights and giving us a fee to do that with no pocket expense from us at all.
Any of those expenses comes back to council for a
Correct.
decision anyway? Okay.
Correct.
What do you have a question?
Yeah, those are great. How about Pearson's Field, her perspective on that?
Well, I'm not certain what she's talking about. We dropped $80,000 into an irrigation system at Pearson's Field. So that was a few years ago when we first did the remodel out there. And so we allocated those funds, and we use those funds for that very reason. So I'm not certain what's being referenced on the $100,000 for, and we've done some upgrades there. The Real Estate Association gave us $30,000, and we installed a playground. We went ahead and installed some trees along the northern edge of the alleyway. And so we continue to just, do what we can there without spending much money. At some point in the master plan that we had for that area, we talked about a replacement of a restroom facility. As the mayor well knows, restroom facilities are rather expensive sometimes, and so they are something we haven't gone after. Some additional parking. So there was a master plan a few years back that we brought to you, and we've done some things there, but we haven't really focused on it this year. We had other projects that were taking some priorities.
Thanks.
Abiel, maybe it's something in your Park and Rec Commission, if you want to bring out that person's master plan again and have some discussion amongst your group if there's some other things that we can push forward.
Right. And was there one other item? I can't recall.
If we missed it, I'm sure Susie will remind us at some point. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Bill. So on the list, I have Lorna Carpenter that wishes to give some testimony. Welcome.
Okay, so 6,000 new residents have moved to Coeur d'Alene in the last 10 years. We're now at about 50,000. In the 2008 and 2009 budget, the police department was funded roughly $8.4 million. The fire department was roughly 6, and the streets garbage was 1.8 million. So that's for 44,000 people. Now we go forward and it's 2018-19. And the budget gives the police department almost 13.3 million, plus another that was in the newspaper, and I don't know how that's dispensed. But the fire department gets almost 9.6 million, and the streets and garbage gets a little over 3 million. That's an increase of 4.9 million for the police department, 3.6 for the fire department, 3.1 for the street/garbage department for 6,000 additional people. It's not like we're making new streets and things. It's kind of overreaching for 6,000 people. We have to be mindful of that. And you say, well, they come for our services, they come for this, they come for that. But it's up to them to make their own issue about how they want to live their lives. They don't come here because we promise to make a job for them, to pay them Washington State wages. Shall we do California? Shall we move on? When are you going to stop? Are we going to do New York City? We're not. We live in Idaho. We're Idaho citizens. We're taxpayers, and we're paying on Idaho wages. That's who we are. People come here to be our we. We don't change to be their we. And I was at the meeting where you talked about affordable housing, and you were saying, well, what's that mean? One gentleman said, well, usually it was public housing. No, affordable housing means you can stay in your homes. You know that your city, your county, they're paying attention to what you need to maintain your lifestyle, to move forward, obviously safely. And you'll say, yes, well, we gave the police more money and crimes are down. Well, yes, but if we continue to give the police, as an example, more money, we're going to have more police than we have citizens. We have to stop. 6,000 new people. Yeah, it looks like a lot on the roads, but it's only 6,000. How many people are going to lose their houses? You increase the taxes, you increase the rent. We are, look around us, who are we? We're pretty much publics. I'm selling your McDonald's, I'm selling your whatever. I'm making minimum wage, I've got 2 or 3 jobs, I've got little kids I can't afford to. I'm on, free lunches, because I can't make it. And yet you're going to tell me the people that you want to retain good people. What about us? Aren't we good? We've been here. We voted for you, at least for now. Corporate, okay, take a CEO. I heard you also say, well, you know, I think the department heads really have our best interests at heart. Do they? Maybe. I don't know. But y'all don't seem to have very much oversight. Y'all looked around and said, well, I just feel sure they'd do that. Well, do you know any department? And I was very cheered to hear about the 100,000 put back. That makes me very happy because I don't believe that. I don't. And what CEOs and what board of directors would last if they just said, department heads, it's up to you. I don't care. We'll make it. We took the investors' money. We'll just live. What the hell? We'll ride the tide. I'll take my big payout and, ooh. You're one of us. You got to remember that. You're one of us. You are the we. Not looking for the outsider. Yeah, they'll move here. And they did. 6,000 people moved here, not for new jobs at the city and the police. They moved here to live with us, to become us. Pay them fair, sure. But don't bankrupt us already for them or for anybody. So that's all.
Thank you. So I just had those 2 people on. Is there anyone else that would be willing to wanted to give public testimony tonight? If not, then I will close the public testimony portion of that, and we will look for council action.
Mr. Mayor,
Dan.
Thank you. So I have distributed to the clerk and to council a list of proposed 2018-19 budget cuts, which would bring our property tax increase down to 0%. The main item that's being cut in this list here was highlighted earlier in Vonnie's presentation, which is the chip seal program. And the reason I'm bringing up the chip seal program is because if the city's going to do it, I think we should do it right. I think we should have it vetted by Public Works and Council so that we can see what the real cost is, because we are the city of excellence. We should do everything properly. And I just don't think we're ready quite yet to be taking on chip seal at this time. And therefore, I'm actually, in addition to reducing the items dump truck, chip spreader, distributor, and one new street worker, I would be increasing the chip seal overlay budget by $200,000, which would bring it back up to its the current year's amount. Then also reducing the used equipment line item by $35,000. From the police department, we would be reducing $40,000 for the new radios. And I would also like to count some funding from the EMS system, which has increased since the budget was printed, by $29,000 for a total amount of cuts of $505,000, which should put us well under the 3% property tax raise, or whatever it is now, is 2.25. So I would like to propose an amendment to our budget to adopt these proposed cuts.
So Dan,
I'm making a motion.
So your motion would be to approve the budget as presented with the outlined adjustments to the budget?
Yes, with the additional cuts.
Okay, so there's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. Woody?
So I got this last week or whenever it came out, and it was real interesting because my head started kind of going, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then I had this flashback on the street department. Again, I guess I looked at it as mostly their projection on taking care of our streets in a payback mode. And they have quite a bit of history with that. I remember when they took on sidewalk repair and handicap work from within the department. I remember when Leaf Fest wasn't anything like it is right now. Fine-tuned machinery, a lot of internal successes there. They think, they talk, they make things happen. I remember Snowgates. Before Snowgates, I was here. That was like a big deal. It was a big economic type part on our part when they came to us and said these things are $75,000 each and you can't buy just one. And we stepped it up and we said as a council that we believe that our citizens deserve the best snow removal program we could. The street departments built the first gate. That came from internal there. The de-icer program, beet juice. Who'd have ever thunk beet juice would make snow go away? These guys figured it out. We saved so much money. I think it paid back in 2 years of what we were putting chemicals on the street to melt the ice. The tractors, I remember, it used to freak me out when you had to buy a tractor that was $250,000 and big tires and everything. And Troy and the boys, they came together and figured out a way for us to lease tractors. So we have new tractors every 2 or 3 years. They never get old, they never break down, they're never in the shop, we're never constantly feeding it, as I recall. And then street patching. I remember the crews that have been there over the years, you couldn't tell when you drove over a patch in the street. It was so smooth and so fine. And I always felt proud about that. Talked about we got good streets, we take care of our stuff. Well, then we did McEwen, and I know that was on your list, Dan and Ron. McEwen cost us 2 years of overlay budget, building a bridge. And I think we're still paying for it. Streets are rough, they're a little bumpy, and I know the wastewater treatment guys are trying to work on the manholes that are all lumpy, bumpy. We're all used to certain streets. I watch people dodge, they know where the bump is coming and they dodge it. It's crazy. I think the folks, and I think we're judged by our streets. We're judged by how you move around. I mean, it's great having police and firemen, but if nothing bad happens to you or you don't need to be brought back to life, you're driving the streets, you're going to work, you're going shopping. Those streets become kind of your thing. How are the lights working? All that kind of stuff. I understand where you're coming from, Dan. I do. But these guys put so much time into this, figuring it out, and I think it's a 2 or 3 year payback. Now, chip seal wasn't one of my top priorities. I was a little skeptical because government way looks like hell. It didn't work, I don't think. And Tim, the street guy, said it's his fault. You know, that's the way Tim works. He'll take the fault. But Tim's also the guy that made all this stuff happen, with some history with John before him. In the past, we give fire more money, police more money, everybody gets more money. Streets is usually the last hurrah. They are always giving up. No, we'll be okay. We'll survive. That was Tim's. That's how I know Tim. He'll get by with what he's got, and he does. So, looking at the $480,000 that we're supposedly saving here by not taking the increase, I get it. I don't want to raise taxes, but me personally, my taxes are going to go down. I'm going to save $40.15 this next year because my house didn't go up all that much. But $40, I'll buy my wife some hairspray or something, you know. So my thought, and following the kind of the same line as you, if we don't take the increase, but I think the chip seal program is critical because it's a time frame that the certain players have to be in place to make it happen, and that's Tim. And I wish Tim was here. I don't like to talk about him when he's on vacation. He's on vacation. So I think it's important that he is here to manage this thing and take it through. That's what he does. That's his experience. So my thought is to kind of throw out the idea of if you guys can go along with saving chip seal and not do an increase, and I'm going to Troy and go, hey, how about 480 out of fund balance? It won't hurt. You'll hardly notice it. I mean, we spent more than that just on merit increases. More than that on just merit. For being good employees, we spend $500,000. So that's kind of my reasoning. And I get where you're coming from, and I would love to. But I know next year, it's an election year, we won't take the increase. We just won't. And it'll be kicked down the road again. And that's my concern. I think it's important to maintain our streets. And this is out of the box. I'm a great lover of overlay. So that's
just
all I got.
A couple of things, Wood, if I may, Mr. Mayor. There was a letter to the editor from Dean Haggison a couple of weeks ago that basically we would be competing with private enterprise. Right now, our overlay and chip seal is done by a private company that we contract to. So effectively what we're doing is we are expanding government into an area that right now we have people out there who have jobs and incomes who rely on that to the tune of $750,000 every year that we pay out for that. We don't do it. We bring it into house, we got to do it right. And we should have, and Mr. Martin is not here, but I did ask him those questions that you said about saving money, because he said when he presented this that it would save money. I didn't get an answer on how much money is going to be saved. I actually think this is going to cost us more money than it's listed down. These two items, the chip spreader and distributor, are used. They're used equipment. He's only adding 2 people, but the average chip seal team can be like 8 to 15 people, and they know how to do it. It's been their job, and I think we should just pay private sector and have private sector do it and save the taxpayer some money. Further, the idea does need to be vetted. Your points are all valid. We take excellent care of the streets here. Mr. Martin is not here. His deputy's not here. No one from streets is here. It would be nice to have this item presented at Public Works, gone over, so we can ask the legitimate questions, and then if they want to bring it back next year, with a plan and a matrix and demonstration of how it's going to save money and how we would do it better than the private sector, then I want to hear that. But right now, this is an item, it's what I call making policy through budgeting, which is where they make a decision and then they throw it up to us in the budget, and that's how they set policy. And I don't agree with that. I think it should be presented to us separately. So that was my reason for sticking on this. One issue with these items. There's plenty of other items that I could, Susie mentioned a couple of them that we could cut down in the budget. We could also do what you just said, which is take fund balance for it. Fund balance seems to be high. So we could go ahead and go that way if we wanted to go zero. But I thought I'd throw this out there.
And I guess the one thing is that, so we're already taking fund balance on a significant amount of items. So there is some usage already of the fund balance.
I guess my, again, concern is similar to what's happening in the water department is they're trying to build a building and it went up $1-point-something million because of, and look how long it took for us to do Government Way. Look how long it took to do Ironwood. It was brutal. It was brutal because everybody's busy. And supposedly they're going to be busy for the next 3 to 4 years. That's the time frame that I understood that he thinks it could be paid for itself within that time and fine-tune the guys. We got the best guys. I mean, they do a great job, and they're always looking for new challenges. I mean, they're going to be cutting manhole cover holes eventually. They're doing the patching for the water department. They keep taking on more, and I think you need the carrot. You need to keep, come on, you guys, keep egging them on. That's how people grow, is new challenges and new ideas. So.
Kiki.
So I appreciate both of those positions. I had a couple of things, and I'd ask at the workshop about how this would be job costed and shared, and how was this going to be proven. And I think that between that time and now, I still kind of have some of those same concerns. I agree that almost all of our departments come up with creative, innovative things to try to save money, from the beats to, you know, our joint agreements between police and fire on the active shooter. They're all being innovative to come up with things to be a city of excellence and to stay within their budgets. This one I had more of a concern with. It is kind of a changing landscape out there as far as how the construction industry works. But this is a big commitment. If you invest in this much equipment, this much training, and this much manpower to do the overlay like this, you need to be willing to project out and have council approve the fact that in 4 years, this could be upside down with bad equipment or supplies that you can't stabilize the costs on because you don't have any control over that material anymore. And you can't bid it out anywhere. You're now committed to a large trunk and a large project that your street department has to follow through with. So I had some concerns and was willing to listen to the discussion here about, and it is unfortunate that Tim's not here. I think he's one of the most innovative department heads, and I'd like to have seen his spreadsheet and the pro forma that says this is how this is going to pencil out in all of these areas. But a lot of these things, I think it's a long-term commitment that would be difficult to all of a sudden go backwards on and not lose money and then all of a sudden start subcontracting it out. So taking it out of fund balance, we're already doing that. I'm not sure that's a great plan. But is this one fully vetted to be something that, you know, yes, maybe we vet it this year and we do find out it's a good plan and we end up having to take the taxes to pay for it in an election year, well, so be it. I'm just not sure that this whole program has been presented to me in a way that says that it would be the money saver that somebody testified that it would be. So that was my biggest concern with the commitment to it and not being able to prove that out to council before we approve the dollar amount.
I guess, and then Dan's point of it does take a crew of, what did you say, 8 to 15 people to do a chip seal project. If we're only adding a couple of people, then we're taking street workers off of other projects to do chip seal projects.
Well, and I think that's part of the job costing program that I was talking about, is that if you're saying it's only going to take this much to do that project, well, if you're not hiring people, where are they coming from? And if you're doing work with other municipalities, how are you charging them for the hours on the machine and the people that, you know, that's being used? And how is that on used equipment, what's the factor of how long it's going to take before you have to replace that piece? And if you do have to replace it in the middle of a project, what's the downtime there when you have such a short window?
Vicki, you were also mentioning something to me before the meeting about where we get asphalt. Can you share that with council?
Well, I'm not an expert in the field, but there's people who do chip sealing that own their own supplies. They own their own gravel pits, and they can control what that material is that they buy and that they bid to do the work with. So I don't know where the costs for material and supplies in this particular savings plan came from, but I would suspect that if it was somebody who was supplying their own material and then we went to them to ask them for the same price, the answer might not be yes. So I don't know how that would work out, that those supplies could be guaranteed as far as a cost from a vendor.
Other discussion? Amy?
Well, Mr. Mayor, my question is for Troy. In Tim's absence, can you make any clarifications or give any helpful information?
Thank you. The look at the trucks is not specific only to the chip seal program. It is a cross benefit in the fact that we are running with very, very old dump trucks. 2 dump trucks are in dire need of replacement. And so we have a 1995, and it has about 10,000 hours on it. And our other truck is one with 12,000 hours on it. So there's cross-pollination with this chip seal program that will benefit the removal of snow and the removal of leaves with the acquisition of the dump trucks. So that's one of the gigantic benefits for us, is that we can use it in other ways. It does need that spreader that was spoken about. It's not a gigantic, expensive piece of equipment. And then, of course, the chips have gotten much better over time. We can control that by buying that product. And I've had many positives about ironwood this year. I hope you have as well. And we have better control of the oil that goes down, so it doesn't track, and it locks down that final layer that goes on, that top coat. They call it fog coat, which is basically a oil that's been reduced so it dries much quicker. And so that's a good plan. I also like the fact that it would improve your alleys, which we get a fair amount of energy about that. So the acquisition of a used grader would allow us to go in and do work in the alleys. We have not been in the alleys in probably at least the last 7 or 8 years.
I'm not cutting the grader.
You're not cutting the grader?
No.
So that was one of the other benefits that existed with this program on that. So as you look at your financial plan, jumping back to that, the council needs to be comfortable with a program because it does become a priority. That's why we had strategic planning. That's why we brought it up to you there. We brought it through a workshop. We brought it to you once already with a presentation. So council definitely needs to be comfortable with it. But we are entering into these new contracts, and I totally want to make you aware that COLA and merit increases to the city this year is over $1.1 million. That's ongoing expenses, and without growth, we won't even be close to that. So growth is allowing us to continue keeping this number of FTEs, which has not grown substantially over the last few years, and the cost of medical is up and all the accompanying costs. So with well over 85, 86% of our budget in people, we need the ongoing cash flow. And this year, we're bringing forward capital. We thought we were bringing forward a creative way in which to fund it, with dollars coming from your sanitation fund to help out in the alleys, and the need for these pieces of equipment, partnering up, taking our one-time monies to buy capital. So those would be my big cautions. One idea would be, again, the property tax issue is for sure the #1 issue. If we're not comfortable buying the equipment, we don't buy it on October 1. We can always slow it down. Your approval of a budget, you can tell us today that you want to look at this program one more time. But that property tax revenue is critical for our success going forward on a cash flow basis. As we enter into these contracts and we have a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 5 years to an employee maxing out, that has increased our costs which isn't anything to do with chip seal. It's just the cash needed to take care of these contracts. A 2.5% cost of living increase in the contracts adds up when we have a city with this number of team members on it. So I want to caution you on looking at one program that we could, if we haven't done a good job, we need to come back and reiterate what we believe the savings will be and the benefit to our constituents.
Kiki?
A follow-up, Troy. One of the things I hadn't gotten an answer to was that if this is approved, we take our increase and we approve the streets department budget, when this comes back for initializing and mobilizing the chip seal program, that whole program still has to come to Public Works and then eventually come to council for approval to begin with this equipment purchase. And so what you're saying is at that time, if council doesn't feel it's fully vetted out and it's not a good investment, it could be denied.
That would be my takeaway from this, excellent discussion. If we're not comfortable, it becomes a major portion of what we're asking this department to do. It's a partnership with other cities, which is where we'd be looking for some of those labor partnerships as well, and how would we coordinate that?
And so your intent would be to bring that whole package back to Public Works first to review how that would work and include all of the expenses and spreadsheets that describe that.
Yeah, with this dialogue here tonight, absolutely. I mean, we're not on the same sheet of music on what it is, what it can do, what the equipment would be used for. So yes, hearing this at
Again,
this
tells
point.
me that we should not be voting for it tonight because they haven't vetted it. They don't have the data. Where's the spreadsheet? They put the money in the budget. They said it was going to save money. I asked for a spreadsheet. I didn't get one. That tells me it's not vetted by staff.
So we do have a motion and a second. We're not, I guess, we'll have some more discussion, but kind of the way this works is you just, if there's a motion right now, we're a little ahead of the game here. So when we move forward here, you dispense with the rules first, and then you read the title and things like that, and then the motion to actually approve the budget is at the bottom there. What procedurally, how should we move forward? We'll have some more discussion here, but how does that work?
Well, I think what I took away was that the motion was to amend the proposed language in the ordinance to exclude these items and add in the overlay $200,000 budget and remove radio and EMS revenue as well. So you could have that motion if that was truly your intent, rather than to approve the ordinance with all these changes. For discussion purposes, we can do a vote on that motion and then see
And
where
then
it falls.
proceed through the way. Okay, all right. So more discussion on the motion. Dan?
Well, we did hear this at Public Works, at least somewhat, and preliminary. And I think, to me, it makes a lot of sense. And we have a constant tension, it seems, between, we want to keep costs down and we don't want to increase taxes. On the other hand, sometimes if we don't pay for stuff as we go and the maintenance and all of that, it actually, costs more in the long run. I think where I'm at on this is I'm generally, I like this idea, and as terms of, taking it away from the private sector, I see this as more of, no, this is part of the city infrastructure. This is reasonable for us to be doing that. But I do appreciate there are some unanswered questions. I guess where I'm probably at is saying, I think it's likely a good idea, has good potential, but for this year, maybe it's not ready. And I think I could go with the idea of, well, putting this back 1 year, kind of doing this budget amendment, that would end up with a net, zero increase on the property tax. And I will say, actually, I am a guy that's up next year, and, and I probably I'm enjoying this still, and probably will run, but I'm not saying tonight that, if we need to raise it next year, I'll do what we got to do each year and look at each circumstance. I wouldn't support taking more out of fund balance. I think you can only go so far on that, and I mean, basically that's our savings account, and if you drain that too much, so that's my thought at this point.
Okay, thanks. Ron?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of taking anything out of fund balance. I think I would like to hear what, and Tim's not here, and I'd like to hear what Tim has to say about this. We heard a little bit about with Troy, and another thing, those of us that are up for election next year shouldn't worry about if we're going to increase it or not. I mean, in all the times I've run, I've never voted one way or the other on if I was going to get elected or not. I did what I thought was the right thing to do. And but I'd just like to hear what Tim has to say. I mean, he's our street department guy. He does a great job. And I'd like to see our not an increase in our taxes. I don't know how the hell, be honest with you, I don't know how the hell Post Falls does all this stuff, and they seem to be doing all right out there, but they don't raise their taxes, and I just think that we've got to look at the overall picture, and maybe as Troy said, do a little bit now and a little bit later.
Further discussion on this motion. So Renata, if you could read back Dan's motion in the second, and then we'll vote on it, see where we go.
Okay, I'll see what I can do for you. Motion by Gookin, seconded by Miller to amend Council Bill 18-1020 language to remove the internal chip seal program and capital costs, but increase the overlay budget by $200,000 to bring it back to prior funding levels, removal of police radio, and removal of EMS revenue.
That would be to add the EMS revenue.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Add.
Okay, so that's the motion by Dan, seconded by Kiki and Woody.
Just a couple questions. So Troy, if we go down this path and pull out, just do what the motion said, does that affect your operating dollars? In theory, it shouldn't, right? We bring in
we had proposed the overlay, help me out now, Vonnie. We had proposed a chip seal program take $200,000 from overlay, which the council member has proposed would go back to bring it to $750,000 for the budget. We had proposed to transfer in $170,000 from sanitation fund. We'd proposed revenues from highway users. The street department would go to 1 FTE increase versus the 2. And I didn't hear what we would do with the part-time. We had decreased it to take it to 2. So if we added that back, there'd be some dollars that probably aren't accounted for. And then we had other revenues and transfers in of $128,000, which that then would go to the general fund.
I'm not sure how this works. Okay. So all of those things that were in there had certain revenues attached to them that did not include the 2.25 in property tax. So if we were to remove all of the chip seal, we really need to remove the revenues that funded those in order to make this work. If you take out that 2.25% increase in your property tax, it's going to be very difficult next year to fund your contracts that you've approved, and I believe you've already approved 2 of them. Those actually in the second year are more expensive than they were the first year. So if you remove that tax increase, it's going to be very difficult to make this budget balance next year. But and Troy listed, I have a list of the chip seal equipment and where the funding was coming from in this budget. So if you remove it, I guess what I worry about is you have a large fund balance in this budget that you're using to fund this budget. If you pull that equipment out of there, you're now funding a lot of ongoing costs with your fund balance that's in there. If you wanted to remove the chip seal, but remove the fund balance portion that's funding it. Don't remove the property tax increase.
That's kind of I think the follow-up question that I had to you earlier was if we're going to approve this budget, we literally could do what you said by not approving the program when it comes back. The property tax increase could happen, but we could literally, when it comes to public works, say it's not vetted, it's not something that council wants to move forward with, and not approve it. Or have it gone back to staff to prove that it's a profitable move. But I guess that's where I was going with hearing you say that the 2.5% isn't going to be solved by removing this one line item. It's going to be an ongoing issue if it's not approved now.
And I disagree. You look at the fund balance, the sheet that Bonnie showed us for fiscal year 2017 and then going backwards. And if you start, when I started here, the unassigned fund balance was $4 million. The next year it was $5 million. The next year it was $6 million. The next year it was $7 million. The next year it was $8 million. We keep collecting a lot of fines, fees, and taxes in this organization. I think we can suck it up. I don't think it's going to impact as dreadfully as everyone's saying. I think, and there's, you know what, and there's a lot of other fat in this budget. I mean, if we had the time and you guys really had the patience, I could sit here and go through a lot of line items. Susie named a bunch of them that we could cut that would go ahead and bring down our increase. The question is, do you have the will to do it?
So further council discussion on this issue. Ron?
Yeah, now, Lonnie, what you said, now, if we did pass it, the motion, and then later on, when, and that's maybe when Tim would be here, that we could see that it didn't work, then we don't need to do that. I mean, we wouldn't have to spend that money.
Correct. No. Yes.
But if we pass the motion the way it stands right now, we're going to take it out.
Right.
We don't get to make a decision when it comes back to Public Works like I suggested. So
I want to
that's the way I
clarify
understand
that,
it.
yeah. Just to add what Kiki said, my understanding is if we vote to support the motion on the table right now, then we won't have the option to work with Tim's proposals in the future. We would be correct.
Not out of this budget year.
Right, out of this, excuse me,
Right.
yes.
I mean, it
Yes.
could be the following budget year,
Right.
but not in this current
Not in this budget year.
Yeah. Dan?
Well, and I was just going to clarify that because, again, I think there's a lot of merit to this, but there's also obviously a lot of, or a fair amount of uncertainty. So yes, it should go back, but I mean, in my mind, I don't want to see it go away forever. I mean, I would want to see it, you know, okay,
Absolutely.
let's work on it as for next year's process. And it does, you know, on one hand, it looks like the math works that, gee, if we take that much out and we take a 0% increase, then it's a wash. But I'm hearing that it maybe isn't. Maybe there's some stuff that isn't in the simple sheet.
If you look at the significant changes in the revenue, your new growth is 500,000, your 2.25 is 480,000. If you look at the expenses for your merit increases and your hold on just a second. This one right here. So your COLA and your merit increases are over $1 million. So it's hard to fund those without that 2.25%, because those are going to go up again next year because of the contracts that have been approved. So without that ongoing, you can use your fund balance to fund that this year, which is fine. Your fund balance goes down, but it continues forever, and your fund balance will eventually go away. The other
The fund
thing-
balance goes up every year. I mean, if you show the other thing, fund balance goes up. Mr. Greenwood said that he didn't spend $100,000 for the dog park. Where did that money go? It went into fund balance.
It didn't go into the fund balance because that's in the Parks Capital Improvement Fund, which is not part of the general fund.
Any money they don't spend goes into fund balance from the current budget.
Correct. And a lot of the reason that fund balance has gone up every year is because our police department has not been fully staffed, and they believe that they will be fully staffed, and they will continue to be fully staffed due to the change in the contracts. So I'm not going to guarantee that that fund balance is going to continue to go up. The other thing is...
And if we don't buy the equipment for the chip seal, which is coming out of fund balance, then we're not spending the fund balance.
Correct. Which is why I'm saying that if you want to pull that out, then you need to pull out the revenue side of that, of the fund balance also, to offset it.
Is that an accounting rule?
No, I'm just
I think this
I'm
is
just
a policy
recommending
decision that we're making up here.
No, I'm just recommending that because you don't want to use one-time money to fund ongoing costs.
That thing over there shows that we, well, actually, the other slide showed that we are using one-time money in the form of fund balance.
For capital outlay. One-time money for one-time expenses.
Well, I'm just trying to cut a budget here. All money's fungible.
Me too.
We have a 20% fund balance.
Well, the other thing that you need to remember about your fund balance is that you also just bought a mill site that needs a lot of improvements
That's going to be paid back.
eventually. But you also need to keep your fund balance where you can pay your bills until that happens, because that could be a few years down the road.
So any other council comments on the motion that is on the floor?
Just seems like we have a lot of tail wagging the dog here.
Any other council discussion on that, and then we'll vote on it, and we'll see where we go from there?
I guess my last comment in listening to the discussion and how that works is that I hate to have the whole budget swing on this one department's recommendation, but I feel like it's important that, in my mind, is not vetted out, and it comes back, whether it comes back in this year or not. In this budget, it's going to decide how council votes on that. It needs to come back. It could very likely be a great cost savings measure in the future, but until we determine that that's the case, I'm still kind of sitting on how do you just approve it. So I think Tim needs to be encouraged to come back, and I hope that I hope he's not on vacation watching our comments right now, but that this does get vetted out properly, and that it is something that we can make sure it works in the budget.
So of all the council members up here that have experience in roads and those, Kiki, you're a resident expert on this. So
I'm not an expert. I just know that.
A resident expert.
Okay. I just have been in situations where you can look at this and it might be a good idea, but it can go the other way. And I haven't seen anything myself, and I looked at the Public Works meeting, and there wasn't anything that was tangible enough to make me, if I was the business owner, say, let's invest in that because it'll be proven in the long run. I haven't seen it. So that's really where I'm at with it. It's not that it's a bad idea, I just haven't seen that it's a great idea.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Ron?
Yeah, this was Tim's idea.
I think Tim and his staff, I don't know.
Do you know, Troy?
Yeah, it's been looked at for, we're attempting to keep the constituents' roads in as good a shape as we can. Yeah. And the cost for overlay continues to go up. And so this is a great way to extend streets. I talked a little bit about the chips improving. The way in which the oil is placed out there is better now. We can sweep it up quicker. So it was a looked at solution. And then the city hired an expert out of Ada County that's very, very familiar with it. And they do a lot of chip sealing down there. So we brought in one of our own, basically, to help with this program, and that's where it really started to materialize.
So,
Go ahead, Kiki.
so we hired somebody to run a program that hadn't been approved?
No, he was hired for the job. He just
Oh.
brings that skill set with him as well, which helped us understand fully what Ada County was doing, the equipment that was needed, the way in which the oil would be acquired, working through suppliers to secure those types of cost estimates. It is oil-based, so you're correct. That commodity will change prices. And we did the same thing when we looked at doing our own de-icer. You know, we bought the salt, which is a commodity, and that price will bounce around. We figured out a way to store it when we could buy it when the price was down, keep it in cold storage, blend our own, do it based on what the temperatures outside are and the salt content.
Okay. One last, Ron.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking about the street department and all this here. I'd like to ask the police chief, you know, these radios. What do you think about that? He's here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As long as, my understanding is there are still some radios in the budget for the one-time expense out of the capital that Vonnie has proposed. As long as those remain in there, then the reduction in that one line item for radios in our budget is appropriate. That's fine. I guess what I'm saying is the reason I'm okay with that reduction is because there's the increase on the other side for just the one-time money instead of the ongoing budget from the police department.
Okay, thank you. And it seems that we've got the police fire chief here. What do you think about the EMS?
The budget item.
Checks in the mail.
I'm thinking, Ron, that that's just an adjustment because the EMS figure was approved later after the number was put in.
So I'm in favor of giving you more EMS money, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other?
One more.
Okay, Woody.
Let me just go down this path very clearly. So it's not about the 480 or the chip seal. If we threw it out, it doesn't change the fact that the theory is we don't have to raise taxes, 2.25. That is not necessarily true, is what you're saying, because of the long term.
So when we put the chip seal in the budget, we came up with revenues other than taxes on how we would fund it. So my recommendation, if you're going to pull that program out of the budget, you need to pull out where those revenues were coming from. Some of them were reduction in expenses. We took $200,000 out of overlay. We took part-time out to make a full-time position. There was a lot of decrease in some expenses to increase others to do the chip seal. There was also increase in some revenues transfers in from the sanitation fund. So I'm just saying if you want to get rid of the chip seal program, fine, but you should get rid of where those monies were coming, because we identified areas to fund that program that were not tax related.
But the way this is, the way this amendment's written, it says that by taking the chip seal out, we don't have to raise taxes to maintain all the expenses.
Well, I have a hard time answering that question because I have not seen the proposal. So I don't know what's in it, what's coming out of what.
In looking at this, Wood, the chip seal budget, he's adding the $200,000 back into the chip seal budget. So the chip seal budget is the same. I think, Vonnie, part of the money that was added was enterprise funds, and Dan, I believe you left the equipment in, and the enterprise funds out of the sanitation was for the alleys, and that equipment was left in.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So any transfer from the sanitation fund, that equipment was left in. He's not reducing that.
Well, I just think we're trying to not raise taxes by 2.25, and by just taking that money out doesn't necessarily, it accomplishes not raising the taxes, but next year, where's it going to be? You're saying that's ongoing, so you put 2.2 in this year, you need that to start off next year to put another 1 or 2 or 3. Without chip seal, without any extra problems, just dealing with the good benefits, the merit pays, the 10-year, 3-year, 5-year, it's the employee thing. It's the cost of doing business in this world. And I'm with you trying to save the money, but it doesn't work that way as I'm understanding it, or I'm just not getting it. Sorry, you guys talk a different language. You need to kind of dumb it down for me, would you?
Well, it's hard for me to, I haven't seen what's on the table, so I don't know. I can't answer to you how that would work. I haven't seen it.
So I guess we could, there's two things that we can agree. We can agree to the adjustment on EMS, and we can agree to the radios, right? Those are two issues, right?
We're rolling.
I'm not even sure what the adjustment to EMS
Well, I think
was.
that what the adjustment is that the contracted amount is actually $29,000 higher than we have currently in the budget. I think that is the issue, correct, Dan?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so those two items. So the question is, and just let me clarify, Dan, you're not saying that the chip seal program is totally off the table. You feel that there needs to be more study and vetting.
I'd like to unfund it and the dump trucks and basically have Mr. Martin be here and bring it back. I asked him, sent him an email, because he said this would be a cost-saving measure, and I asked for the spreadsheet and the metrics, and I got a verbal reply. I did not get a spreadsheet. So I need, or a written reply. I just think it needs to be vetted. It's also something, and again, go back to that letter from Dean, the letter to the editor. This is something the private sector does, and I think they do it efficiently and cheaply enough. And it looks like if we're going to take this on, we're talking a commitment of personnel and hardware forever. And, you know, that to me, that's something we don't need to do. We should do what the private industry cannot do for itself, what the public cannot do for itself. And the public has demonstrated they can do chip seal. We don't need to take it over.
But we have people that plow snow, we have people that landscape, we have people that do everything. Why would you say that that's not a job for the city? If you want to maintain your own quality.
It hasn't been a job for the city forever, Woody.
Well, but I'm saying we're evolving. You know, we're
no,
plowing snow, and now other people are plowing snow and mowing lawns. Did we ever have a lawnmower
Private industry
here?
mows its own lawn. We mow the parks, and we mow our public spaces, and we maintain the streets because those are public property. We plow them, and we repair them, and we do a good job doing that.
Right.
But when it came time for chip seal or overlay, we've always contracted that out. There's a lot of stuff that we contract out. I actually disagreed with the ADA sidewalk rule when council decided on that and decided that they would take it in-house. I think that could have been contracted out as well. It's just concrete.
All right, that's good discussion. Dan?
Well, just, again, I have no problem taking this out and basically saying, let's take a year to come back. But I guess after hearing, financial staff and, having been in the budget situation for a number of years, have a concern that if we zero out that increase, it does make a real impact down the road. So I don't know if it's as simple a trade-off as it maybe appears.
Okay. All right, anything else? So Renata, I guess if you do a roll call, please.
Okay, to be clear, I did not catch in the motion any wording about removing property tax increase at this time.
This is just reducing the budget. So it reduces the budget and reduces the increase to zero.
Did you want that in your motion?
What was my motion?
The motion that I captured was to amend Council Bill 18-1020 language to remove the internal chip seal program, and I can list as you outlined it in this document, and capital costs, but increase the overlay budget by $200,000 to bring it back to prior funding levels, removal of police radios, and an addition of the EMS revenue.
Right, and the goal there is to reduce the property tax increase to zero, or to eliminate the property tax increase.
So that was his motion, and then were you good with that second?
I'm good with that second. And then if we're voting to do that, then if that fails, we would then have to hear a motion to rediscuss the budget again. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, okay. All right, so roll call on that.
English,
No.
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans,
No.
Miller,
Yes?
Wait,
McEvers,
I'm going to abstain? No. That's a Ron move, Ron.
Gookin,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. So then from there, Renata?
So I'm not sure if, Vonnie, do you need a little recess to rework numbers for the ordinance? Because in order to approve the ordinance, we have to have the final budget number. And since you've changed some things, I think Vonnie needs to rework that final number for
Okay,
your
all right,
final
so we'll
motion.
take a, Bonnie, how many minutes do you need? Well, I guess the proposal is just to,
I need some numbers, though. I don't know what the numbers are for each of those items that we're pulling.
we'll just have a, right now, we'll just say we'll take a 15-minute recess.
What are we doing now?
will call our meeting back to order, and we have one final piece of business here, so.
Before we go there, Mayor, I would just like to apologize to Vani and Troy for not handing them that proposed cuts before the meeting. That would have been proper, and I neglected to do that, and it's my fault. I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have, we've revised the number based upon the past amendment. So now we'd be looking at dispensing with the rules. Renata would read the title, and then we would move to adoption of our amended budget. So if we want to start off with the first piece of action.
I'd make a motion to dispense with rules when reading the title only once.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? We've never had any discussion on that. It's kind of a bad item.
Would you like some?
No, I would not.
Not today.
Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill Number 18-1022, an ordinance entitled the Annual Appropriation Ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018, appropriating the sum of $90,685,504 to defray the expenses and liabilities of the City of Coeur d'Alene for said year, levying a sufficient tax upon the taxable property within said city for general revenue purposes for which such appropriation is made, levying special taxes upon the taxable property with said city for special revenue purposes within the limits of said City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, providing for severability and providing an effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
No.
Gookin?
Yes.
Motion carried. And then now with action on the second part.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we adopt Council Bill 18-1022.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call, please.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Evans?
No.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
No.
Gookin?
Yes.
Motion carried. Motion, next part of it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.